So I was doing my English homework the other day and reading Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried when I stumbled upon this passage. But the thing about remembering is that you don't forget. You take your material where you find it, which is your life, at the intersection of past and present. The memory traffic feeds into a rotary up on your head where it goes in circles for a while. Then pretty soon, imagination flows in and the traffic merges and shoots off down 1,000 different streets. Although all of my classmates, of course, took it for granted, I kept going back to it in the in-class discussion of the chapter spin. I've always been particularly skeptical regarding the reliability of memory. As O'Brien wrote, memory traffic simply deposits in our head and remains there in motion and constant interaction with imagination and a million other daily experiences. Hence, is it possible that memory gives us an accurate perception of past experiences? Addressing this knowledge question, I encountered a variety of obstacles. First off, how will we ever be able to know what an accurate perception of an experience is? For instance, if an event takes place and both A and B evidence it and then tell it to other people, which one should C believe? If both A and B perceived it differently, who decides what the accurate perception is? This leads to another implication of this knowledge question, which regards the ambiguity of accuracy. Who again gets to decide? This led me to ponder upon the significance and definition of three terms I consider to be crucial in the exploration of this question: memory, past experience, and accurate perception. Memory, I decided, would be looked as the experience as the mind stores it, meaning that what one recalls the experience having been. Past experience will be viewed as any event one was physically present in. Lastly, an accurate perception will be the becoming aware and interpreting external stimuli in a factual manner, unbiased, with no personal judgment. Taking each of these terms into full consideration regarding the question, can memory give us an accurate perception of past experiences, I have analyzed that one may be provided with an accurate perception of past experiences through memory if, and only if, one doesn't depend solely on one way of knowing, but rather also uses memory along with other ways of knowing, such as our reason and logic. However, in order to further examine this claim, I decided to open my IB Psychology folder and go over a TED Talk I'm fond of regarding memory. The main concept Daniel Kahneman bases his talk on is that we have an experiencing self which lives and knows the present, and a remembering self which maintains the story of our life and makes decisions. In a day-to-day basis, we use the experiencing self in lapses of 3 seconds or less, while the remembering self is in charge of processing these lapses of experience into the memory. Basing stories on these two kinds of selves, he provided insight in the memory is defined by the changing parts of the experience and the end. An example Kahneman used to illustrate the significance of the ending of a story and the recall of the story is how patients felt about colonoscopies. If the colonoscopy ended in pain but was shorter, they had a worse memory of the experience than if the colonoscopy was longer but did not end in pain. Therefore, the longer colonoscopy, the worse for experiencing self and the more net pain involved, but the better for the remembering self, for the procedure would have a subtle ending. Hence, this demonstrates how relying only on memory may not allow one to have an accurate perception of an experience. Nonetheless, it is my belief that if patients would have evaluated their pain at each of the stages rather than regarding the colonoscopy in terms of memory only, they would have understood which one of the colonoscopies was actually more hurtful. However, although I truly defend this point of view, I am more than sure that many will consider that memory is the only way of knowing available regarding an experience from the past, hence making other ways of knowing useless if one is already basing the primary line on the event of memory. However, I do not think this is possible for memory. This is possible because memory simply embarks the notion of the situation and takes us back to the moment, but the human brain is rather fully capable of using other ways of furthering knowledge, such as reason, to differ what the accurate perception of the experience should be, rather than it is regarding memory only. Now, to further apply this concept of memory giving us insight into accurate perception of past experiences, I looked into another study by Daniel Kahneman on memory. This study depicts how a man who listened to 20 minutes of beautiful music and a horrible 3-second screech in the end will regard the symphony as being flawed. Due to the accidental screech in the finale of the symphony, he now thinks of the experience as an unpleasant concert. This is an example of when memory is not reliable, for he takes for granted the 20 minutes of enjoyable music, which is the experiencing self, and simply recalls the screech at the end, the flawed remembering self. Nonetheless, my same point is defended. If the man reasons through the experience rather than solely relying on his memory alone, he may acknowledge how the screech was actually only on the last part of the symphony, and will then realize that the symphony overall was actually quite enjoyable. Despite the fact that all he was to regard the experience of the symphony in his memory, the perception of the past experience may be changed by using active ways of knowing and applying them to the memory of the experience, such as in this case, reason to understand how 3 seconds doesn't compare to 20 minutes of beautiful music. However, this also leads us to the question, why put so much weight on memory relative to the little relevancy it has in experiences? Well, satisfaction of an experience doesn't tell you about the memory of satisfaction of each experience, but memory is the only way to recall the past and hence have a line in time which to follow events from. Therefore, memory becomes crucial when it comes to the cycle of knowing for humans. Memories form the basis on which our standards, belief systems, attitudes, and expectations are formed. We incorporate our memories into our unconscious mind's database and unknowingly reference back to them as we live our lives. When something happens to us, we check for good, bad, familiar, unfamiliar, and then decide how to react automatically, all in a split second of time. Aquí pon paréntesis, lifestyle therapy. Okay. Porque este es el citation. So, if it weren't for memory, we wouldn't know how to act in future circumstances. Nonetheless, if memory doesn't allow for an accurate perception of a past experience, how then apply previous lived concepts to present situations if they are not precise? That is why, although human memory has shown to be flawed, it is important to not only rely on memory, but rather also combine other ways of knowing of the human brain, other methods for investigation and exploration of knowledge and concepts to be able to apply them to the future in a useful manner. Don't let the imagination and the other elements in your mind mix up with the untouched memory of an experience, as O'Brien said in his quote. Simply make sure to rely on memory to the extent in which you may also acknowledge its flaws, and hence use other ways of knowing to put it into precise and valuable practice. Don't choose the colonoscopy with the greater neck pain. Yeah.
Take a dark blue color. Here